This is Michael David Cobb Bowen for Cobb Vision, and I'm just going to go kind of off the cuff here without any prepared statements or remarks. This is a kind of reaction video to Ta-Nehisi Coates and John McWhorter, two of my favorite black writers out there, and they were talking about number one, the revolutionary premise or promises of hip-hop, and some discussion about Barack Obama's blackness, whether it was a help or a hindrance. The first thing, and I'll probably spend most of my time talking about this, is on hip-hop, and I'm just going to try to be a third leg into the discussion and say the things that I think weren't said that probably could have been said and made that a little bit more interesting to me, though it was a very interesting conversation, primarily because of the artificial distance that has been put between those two gentlemen as writers in the rough and tumble of the blogosphere, where everybody wants to pick a team and say, you know, your team sucks. And what I would like to address, because it concerns me as well, is the relationship between money and organization and bandwidth and attention span and that thing that we've called black cultural production, which is to say, the reason I think that there are books and there are blogging head TVs and there are discussions about the revolutionary nature of hip-hop is because, and those get focused, is because basically we don't have a lot of time to talk about everything. And one of the ideas that has some continuity and stays out there is the political significance of hip-hop. And it's something that you can't simply dismiss. Back in 92, 93, when I was writing hip-hop, when I was doing performance poetry in New York City, I had desires to join the cadre of black writers. And what we talked about, and from my perspective, just kind of a talented 10th, taking privileges for granted, kind of jet-setting black person, if that could apply to me. There was a limited amount of bandwidth that hip-hop had. I mean, you don't just go and say, okay, I have ideas and now I'm going to be a hip-hop recording artist. You have to get somebody with money to believe in you. And I love Vernon Reid of Living Colour, his famous line, which is, that song that you fell in love to was a commodity even before you ever heard it. There's this long process by which you can attract attention to yourself as an artist, and certainly as a performance poet, you really know that. And so there's stuff that's going to sell. There's attention that you're going to get to your ideas. And when you talk about the potential for hip-hop as a genre, or the best of hip-hop or the worst of hip-hop, anyway, to motivate people, you have to figure out how you're going to get your message out there. And everybody, who maybe sits on the train for an hour and commutes to work, they have that hour of time. So are they going to listen to hip-hop songs? Are they going to read, Toni Morrison or Terry McMillan? Or are they going to pick up a book? Or are they going to look at, some artistry? Are they going to do something themselves? There's only a certain amount of time that people have, and what do they pull into their heads when they think about what is going to help me as a black person, or what is going to help the black community? And if you believe it to be hip-hop, it must be because somebody is taking the time to put hip-hop out in front of you. So as an artist myself, you never know how your art is going to affect people. That's true. You just don't. You can be very didactic, maybe like Public Enemy or KRS-One, and I want to get back to KRS-One because he was somebody who wasn't mentioned. And I'm just scratching my head thinking, how can you not mention KRS-One when you're talking about the revolution of hip-hop in terms of people who are didactically saying something about revolution and politics? But you really have this kind of competition for people's attention. And as a poet, if you're on the poetry scene, you're like, well, should I go, the ultimate thing in New York is to be published by the New Yorker, have your poem in the New Yorker. And you would go down to New Yorker or Blue Moon Cafe or wherever you were going to go to get yourself out there and try to say something you know, that is going to get somebody's attention. And so you have to admit that there's a competition, there's a hierarchy, and this hierarchy, you know, there's something to be said about that. You're going to be in Source or the Vibe magazine, or there's going to be an alternative magazine, or maybe you get into the Village Voice. There is a struggle for attention going on. And so you can't, I don't think, do what Ta-Nehisi did there and just say, well, you know, it's art, and you can't necessarily say that it's going to be influential or it's not going to be a revolution, because there is a competition for people's attention. And there are people who are directly saying, I want to change people's minds about how they are in America and what needs to be done in America. And you can't say Chuck D accidentally did that. You can't say KRS-One accidentally did that. You can't say the Roots accidentally did that and they didn't expect to be taken seriously, because they did. And they got the idea of revolution out there because they were purposefully pursuing it. So I think it's a little bit of a cop-out on that side, even though you can't necessarily tell how art is going to be. But that's exactly why you are an artist and you're not a politician, because artists can say things that politicians can't say. They can cut to the chase, and they can say, you know, Black Steel in the Hour of Chaos. That's real. And Ice Cube can say, fuck the police. They can say things that politicians can't say, because you want to inspire people towards a feeling, and that feeling is something you expect to translate into action. It's not just you expect people to sit in their homes and never mouth the words to their lyrics once they're outside of their homes, that it's like just this passive entertainment. Okay, so I think that is, again, something that wasn't pursued on this, and it makes sense because they want to be, you know, respectable and amiable to each other, so they can get to a point where they can continue this dialogue, because it's an important black intellectual dialogue that takes place. So I guess I'm going to leave on leaving towards the conflict. Okay, so let's talk about, you know, how that gets into place. They talked about hip hop being kind of pugnacious because it comes from young men, and that's completely understandable. So let's talk about the effect on women, and let's talk specifically about how there was a woman, and now I'm blanking on her name, because there was a periodical of you know, pretty high quality stuff that was written back in those days, and there was one female intellectual professor who really took, I think it was Bell Hooks. Bell Hooks really took KRS-One to task, and he says, you know, she. So there's a competition, I think, that you have to acknowledge as an intellectual. If there's a message that you want to get to poor black people or whatever your audience that you're trying to reach, a college professor only has a certain audience, and generally they're speaking, they're the ones who can afford college, and you do not take hip-hop, I mean, hip-hop takes itself as communicating to people on the streets, and sometimes those messages conflict. You have to ask, well, are people going to read Bell Hooks' book, or are they going to listen to KRS-One's rap song? And Cornel West objectively tried to go in and bridge that gap, and that's been something that's been going on for a long time. Also, Gary Bird tried to bridge that gap as well. So they're talking about reaching the bourgeois and rocking the boulevard. That's not a joke. So I think you really do have to take hip hop to task, or political hip hop to task, if it claims to be for a revolution, and a revolution is not a good idea. In the realm of ideas, there ultimately are conflicts, and there ultimately is going to be distance, like there's distance between Ta-Nehisi Coates and John McWhorter. And when somebody's wrong, you have to get back and say, I was wrong. And I don't think anybody is hearing Chuck D says, well, I made a nation of millions, I was wrong, I was politically wrong, and the election of Obama, which he had nothing to do with and had no idea was coming, just like most people had no idea was coming, stands in directed conflict with a lot of the words people were hearing. And then you get to the point where Nas or somebody makes a rap in support of Obama, and Obama's like, where's that coming from? Get out of here. That has nothing to do with me. And so you have to ask yourself, if the message of hip-hop, if it was coherent and consistent, didn't lead to the kinds of success that Obama has had coming out of left field, then somebody was wrong. And the people who are wrong are sometime going to have to be called into account, whether they're artists or political strategists or not. If the emotion that they were trying to foist, to inspire was wrong-minded, then they're going to have to come correct sooner or later on that. And I think part of the thing that I'm trying to do is somebody who was a progressive, who was a black nationalist, who was raised very strong and understanding those things, who have come to correct, my understanding of economics from a conservative point of view, and a large other number of things is part of that process. And so that's the thing I think that this Blogging Heads conversation really didn't cover, which is the reconciliation of people coming from blackness in terms of a real political agenda that's really going to be consequential, of how the mindsets of hip-hop or revolutionary political hip-hop is working towards those ends, or it's just kind of has nothing to do with it. I think to the extent that it was working towards those ends and people were explicitly political, rappers like Paris, who would take names like Black Thought, they really have to come correct, and they have to reconcile themselves with the themes and what they were trying to inspire in people. So that's my message, my third leg of the conversation that I didn't get a chance to be in, and I'm just coming aware of that was happening in October. This is Michael David Cobb Bowen for Cobb Vision, outsider, not invited to the party, but never can stop me from saying what I gotta say. Peace.